I've read a little of Darwin, I said. I read in the library so my father won't know. He's very strict about what I read. You read books about evolution and things like that? I read anything good that I can get my hands on. I'm reading Hemingway now. You've heard of Hemingway? Sure. Have you read any of his works? I read some of his short stories. I finished A Farewell to Arms last week. He's a great writer. It's about the First World War. There's this American in the Italian army. He marries an English nurse, only he doesn't really marry her. They live together and she becomes pregnant and he deserts. They run away to Switzerland and she dies in childbirth. I didn't read it. He's a great writer, but you wonder about a lot of things when you read him. He's got a passage in the book about ants on a burning log. The hero, this American, is watching the ants, and instead of taking the log out of the fire and saving the ants, he throws water into the fire. The water turns into steam, and that roasts some of the ants, and the others just burn to death in the log or fall off into the fire. It's a great passage. It shows how cruel people can be. All the time he talked, he kept staring out the window. I almost had the feeling he wasn't talking so much to me as to himself. I just get so tired of studying only Talmud all the time. I know the stuff cold, and it gets a little boring after a while. So I read whatever I can get my hands on. But I only read what the librarian says is worthwhile. I met a man there, and he keeps suggesting books for me to read. That librarian is funny. She's a nice person, but she keeps staring at me all the time. She's probably wondering what a person like me is doing reading all those books. I'm wondering a little myself, I said. I told you. I get bored studying just Talmud. And the English work in school isn't too exciting. I think the English teachers are afraid of my father. They're afraid they'll lose their jobs if they say something too exciting or challenging. I don't know. But it's exciting being able to read all those books. He began to play with the earlock on the right side of his face. He rubbed it gently with his right hand, twirled it around his forefinger, released it, then twirled it around the finger again. I've never told this to anyone before, he said. All the time I kept wondering who I would tell it to one day. He was staring down at the floor. Then he looked at me and smiled. It was a sad smile, but it seemed to break the mood he was in. If you'd have ducked that ball, I would still be wondering, he said, and put his hands back into his pockets. I didn't say anything. I was still a little overwhelmed by what he had told me. I couldn't get over the fact that this was Danny Saunders, the son of Reb Saunders, the tzaddik. Can I be honest with you? I asked him. Sure, he said. I'm all mixed up about you. I'm not trying to be funny or anything. I really am mixed up about you. You look like a Hasid, but you don't sound like one. You don't sound like what my father says Hasidim are supposed to sound like. You sound almost as if you don't believe in God. He looked at me, but didn't respond. Are you really going to become a rabbi and take your father's place? Yes, he said quietly. How can you do that if you don't believe in God? I believe in God. I never said I didn't believe in God. You don't sound like a Hasid, though, I told him.